Earlier, Darius had agreed to step into the most outrageous agreement of his life, an agreement that even he, during those long nights lying on a hospital cot waiting for updates on Zoe, could not believe he had nodded to. He agreed to give billionaire Victoria Sterling a child. In return, she would cover the entire cost of the surgery that would save Zoe, the little girl who was his whole world. Zoe had undergone her operation successfully. Victoria was now pregnant, and between two people from two completely different worlds, something had begun to grow. Not love, not yet, but concern, understanding, warmth, the kind both had forgotten long ago. Darius thought the hardest part was over. He was wrong, because in the shadows someone else had seen everything. Richardson, the vice chairman of the board, a man willing to burn Victoria to the ground just to seize power, now held photos that could destroy both her reputation and her life overnight. And just when things seemed to be settling, Keisha, Darius's ex-wife, the woman who abandoned Zoe when the girl needed her most, suddenly returned, demanding to see her child. But danger and trouble were not coming solely from the outside. Fate had never been merciful to anyone, and it always demanded a price. When Victoria made a new proposal, even more insane than the first agreement, a marriage, Darius was forced to confront the question he had spent his entire life avoiding. Could he truly love this woman? And if he could, would that love be strong enough to protect them from everything waiting ahead? If you're following this story, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss the next part, because what's coming will be far more intense. You want to know how Darius will answer Victoria, don't you? Stay with me. The story is far from over. Everything began on a Friday afternoon. Darius had just returned from the hospital after visiting Zoe when he saw Dorothy, the housekeeper, waiting by the front door of the mansion, looking uneasy. "Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Sterling wants to see you immediately in her office." "What happened?" Dorothy only shook her head softly, avoiding his eyes, offering no explanation. Darius stepped into Victoria's office. She was standing by the window with her back to him, but he could clearly see her tense shoulders, her hands clenched tight as if holding herself together. "Victoria?" It was the first time he'd called her by her first name, not Mrs. Sterling. He didn't know when it happened, but the distance between them had shrunk enough that formal titles suddenly felt foreign. Victoria turned around. Her face was pale. "Richardson knows." Those 4 words hit Darius like ice water thrown straight into his chest. "Knows? What do you mean?" Victoria handed him a brown envelope. Inside were photographs, a photo of Darius walking out of the mansion, his tall, dark frame unmistakable against the white columns, a photo of Darius and Victoria standing by the window, a photo of Darius holding her hand in the garden, his deep brown skin contrasting against her pale fingers, and one taken from afar, but clear enough to show Victoria resting her head on Darius's shoulder. "He hired a private investigator to follow me," Victoria said, her voice trembling slightly. "For the past 2 weeks. I had no idea." Darius stared at the photos, feeling as if the ground beneath him had cracked open. "What does he plan to do with these?" "He called me this morning." Victoria lowered herself onto the chair, her hands circling her stomach, as if protecting the child inside. "He said that if I don't resign as CEO and hand over control to him, he will send these photos to the media, to shareholders, to everyone." "Resign?" Darius almost couldn't believe his ears. "You built this company for 15 years. "I know," Victoria cut him off, bitterness thick in her voice. "But he doesn't care. He's waited for this moment for years, and now he has exactly what he needs." Darius stepped closer and knelt in front of her. "We'll find a way. There has to be a way." "What way?" Victoria lifted her eyes to him, her blue irises full of despair. "Those photos are real. What's between us is real. If the press finds out, they will tear me apart. Female CEO pays janitor to get her pregnant. Can you imagine that headline?" She stood up abruptly, pacing the room like a trapped animal. "And it's not just about reputation." She clenched her fists. The stock will plunge, partners will pull out, everything my father built, everything I've spent my entire life protecting could collapse in a single night. Darius rose to his feet. His head spun. One thought echoed relentlessly. It was all his fault. If he hadn't come into her life, if he hadn't agreed to that insane deal from the beginning, Victoria wouldn't be cornered like this. "I'll leave," he said, his voice tight. "I'll disappear. You can tell Richardson I'm just a gardener or a distant acquaintance. I'll never show my face in public." "And the baby?" Victoria looked straight at him. "Do you think Richardson will ignore the fact that I'm having a child with no father?" Darius fell silent. She was right. Even if he vanished, the problem remained like a ticking bomb. "So what do you plan to do?" Victoria stood still for a long time. The silence became so sharp that Darius could hear the ticking of the wall clock. Then she looked up, her voice frighteningly calm. "There is one way." "What way?" She met his eyes without hesitation. "We get married." Darius was certain he had misheard. "Get married?" "Yes." Victoria nodded, her expression slowly returning to the sharp, icy resolve she had worn in the early days. "If we get married, the story changes entirely. It won't be a scandal anymore. It's simply a CEO marrying the man she loves, carrying his child. Normal, legal, nothing for anyone to twist. But that would be a lie." "This world is full of lies, Darius." Victoria exhaled softly, exhaustion in her voice. "Do you think marriages in high society are about love? Happiness? No. Most are arrangements, contracts. At least between us, there is still respect." Darius shook his head. He felt as if he'd wandered into some strange dream. "I can't. This isn't how things should happen." "Then how should it happen?" Victoria stepped closer, her eyes glistening but tense. "Do you have a better idea? Can you save my company? Can you make Richardson disappear?" Darius couldn't answer. "I'm not forcing you," Victoria continued, her voice softening. "You have fulfilled your end of the deal. Your daughter had her surgery. You can walk away right now, and I won't take anything back." She turned her back as if ending the conversation. "But if you stay, if you agree to help me survive this, I will make sure you and Zoe have the best life possible, always." Darius stood frozen, his mind tangled. One path was freedom. He could take Zoe far away to a place where no one knew their names, live a simple life. No scandals, no Richardson, no iron gates. Forget this mansion. Forget Victoria. Forget everything. The other path was... what? A paper marriage? A performance that might last the rest of his life? But then he thought of Victoria. The woman curled up crying alone in her late mother's room. The woman reading children's books at midnight. The woman who had pulled him and Zoe out of the abyss without asking for anything except a child. And he thought of the baby she carried. His baby. "Victoria?" She turned. Darius stepped closer, his heart beat loud, but his eyes steadier than ever. "If I agree, this won't be a fake marriage." Victoria frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I've been by your side for the past 2 months," Darius said slowly, choosing each word carefully. "I've seen you cry. I've seen you laugh. I've seen you strong enough to terrify anyone. And I've seen you fragile enough to fear letting anyone close. And He hesitated, battling himself. "I don't know if this is love. I'm afraid to call it that. But I know I care about you. Truly care. Not because of money, not because of the deal." Victoria froze, her lips parting slightly, unable to speak. "If we get married," Darius continued, "I want it to be real. At least to try to be real. Not a performance for the cameras, only to return to being strangers once the doors close." He reached out and took her hand. "Are you willing to try?" Victoria looked down at his hand holding hers. his broad, dark hand with calloused palms from years of hard labor, the hand that carried Zoe through clinics, the hand that cooked her eggs in the middle of the night, the hand that always reached for her whenever she looked like she might break. She looked up again, her blue eyes shimmering. For the first time in her life, a man had spoken to her like this, without wanting anything in return. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know how to love someone anymore, Darius. I forgot how." "Then we'll learn," he said, his voice warm and steady. "From the beginning." Victoria glanced at their joined hands one more time, her pale fingers intertwined with his dark ones, as if weighing her entire life in that single moment. Then she nodded. "All right." Her voice trembled, but the hopelessness in her eyes had faded. "We'll try." News of Victoria Sterling's wedding spread like wildfire. Within just 24 hours of the official announcement, every newspaper in Atlanta, big and small, ran the story. The most powerful female billionaire in Georgia was marrying an unknown man, a black man from the South Side who had been working as a janitor just months ago. No one knew who Darius Thompson was. No one understood why Victoria would choose someone so ordinary, and that was exactly what Victoria wanted. She held a short press conference, appearing in public with Darius standing beside her. Victoria wore a cream-colored dress, her belly slightly rounded, and for the first time in many years, she gave a genuine smile in front of the cameras. "I know people have a lot of questions," she said, her voice calm. "But love doesn't need an explanation. Darius is the man I chose, and I have never been happier." The reporters immediately erupted, questions firing off like machine gun bursts. "Mrs. Sterling, what did Mr. Thompson do for a living before this? How did the two of you meet? Is this a shotgun wedding?" Victoria didn't answer them one by one. She simply took Darius's hand, smiled, and said, "We'll be having a small private ceremony in 2 weeks. Thank you all for your concern." Then she turned and walked away, leaving the press stunned that they had gotten nothing out of her. Richardson, on the other hand, couldn't bear it. He had prepared the perfect scandal, and Victoria turned it into a romantic love story. He had no more cards to play. At least, that's what Darius thought. A week before the wedding, Darius brought Zoe to the mansion. She had fully recovered from the surgery. Her cheeks were rosy, her brown eyes sparkling, her laughter bright and clear like wind chimes. Her dark curly hair bounced as she skipped along. When the car stopped in front of the gate, Zoe's mouth fell open. "Daddy, is this a castle?" Darius chuckled, though anxiety twisted inside him. This was Zoe's first time meeting Victoria. He had no idea how things would go. He didn't know how his daughter would react to the news that her father was about to marry a woman she'd never met. Victoria was waiting at the door. She wore a simple floral dress, her hair down softly, looking gentler than Darius had ever seen her. When Zoe stepped out of the car, the two of them looked at each other. 1 second of silence. Then Zoe tilted her head, studying Victoria with innocent curiosity. "Who are you?" Victoria bent down to her eye level. "I'm your dad's friend," she said, her voice softer than a breeze. "My name is Victoria." "Victoria," Zoe repeated. "Your name is like a princess in a cartoon." Victoria let out a small laugh, a real laugh. "Is that so? No one has ever called me a princess before." "But you live in a castle," Zoe pointed at the mansion. "Anyone who lives in a castle is a princess." Victoria turned to look at Darius, her eyes shimmering. "She's really smart." Darius could only smile. Watching Victoria and Zoe together, he felt a gentle warmth spread through his chest. That afternoon, Mrs. Lorraine arrived as well. Darius was more nervous about this meeting than anything else. His mother was a traditional black woman from the South, raised in the church, strong in her faith and her values. How would she react to the news that her son was about to marry a billionaire, a white woman he'd known for less than 3 months? But Mrs. Lorraine surprised him. When Victoria came out to greet her, Mrs. Lorraine didn't ask about money, status, or any of the things Darius had feared. She simply took Victoria's hands, looked straight into her eyes, and asked, "Do you care about my son?" Victoria froze. It was a question she had never prepared an answer for. She hesitated. "I'm learning how to care, and Darius is teaching me." Mrs. Lorraine was silent for a few seconds. Then she nodded. "That's enough," she said gently. "Love is not something that comes ready-made. It's something you build day by day." She turned to Darius. "I don't understand everything that's going on. I'm old. I can't keep up with your lives. But I see that you're happy. I see Zoe is healthy. And I see this woman looking at you with the same eyes I once had for your father." She smiled, her old eyes warm and bright. "Sometimes life brings us things we never expected. Our job is to receive them." But not everyone could accept it. 3 days before the wedding, Darius got a call from an unknown number. Darius Thompson. The woman's voice froze him on the spot. "Keisha, I heard you're getting married," Keisha said, her voice tinged with bitterness. "To a billionaire. A white billionaire. You've really done well for yourself." Darius stepped out onto the balcony, away from Zoe, who was playing in the living room. "What do you want?" "I want to see Zoe." "No." "You can't stop me," Keisha said, her voice sharp as a blade. "I'm her mother. I have rights." "You left," Darius replied, his tone so cold it surprised even himself. "You left when Zoe needed her mother most. You don't get to just come back because you feel like it." "I left because I had no choice," Keisha burst out. "You think I wanted to? Zoe was sick. We had no money. Do you think I could handle that? I had to find a way to survive." Darius's fist tightened. "And your way was to go with a rich man and abandon your own child." Silence on the other end. After a moment, Keisha spoke quietly. "I know I was wrong. I know I hurt Zoe. But I'm still her mother, Darius. I have the right to see her." Darius wanted to hang up, block her number, erase the fact that Keisha had ever existed. But he thought of Zoe, of the photo she kept hidden under her pillow, of the question, "Does Mommy Keisha still think about me?" "Let me think about it," Darius said. "I'll call you back." He hung up and stared out at the vast, silent garden of the mansion. The past never truly disappears. It just waits for the right moment to return. That night, Darius told Victoria, Zoe was asleep. The entire mansion was wrapped in silence. "She wants to see Zoe," Darius said, his voice heavy. Victoria watched him for a long moment. "I don't know what to do," Darius sighed. "A part of me wants to say no, wants to protect Zoe from being hurt again. But another part, the other part thinks Zoe needs her mother," Victoria said softly. Darius nodded. Victoria stood and walked toward the window. "I have no right to tell you what to do," she said. "This is between you and Zoe. But I can tell you one thing." She turned back, her gaze softening. "I lost my mother when I was little, and all these years I've only wished I could see her one more time. Just once. To ask the questions I never got to ask. To say the things I never got to say." Her voice trembled slightly. "Zoe still has a mother. That woman did wrong, but she's still her mother. One day when Zoe grows up, she'll want to know why. She'll want to decide for herself whether to forgive or not." Victoria moved closer and sat beside Darius. "Don't take that chance away from her. Don't decide for her." Darius looked at Victoria, the woman he'd once thought was cold, emotionless, untouchable, yet who had a heart softer than anyone's. "Thank you," he said quietly. Victoria gently took his hand. "We're family now, Darius, or at least we're about to be, and family faces everything together." In that moment, Darius understood that he was no longer doing this out of duty or because of a contract. He was doing it because he wanted to, because of the woman in front of him, because of the new family they were building together. The wedding took place on a late autumn afternoon when the maple leaves had already turned a brilliant shade of orange and gold. Contrary to what people imagined a female billionaire would choose, Victoria opted for a simple ceremony, just a few dozen close guests in the garden behind the mansion. No reporters, no cameras, no display of extravagance, only white roses, soft evening sunlight, and two people standing before each other. Victoria wore an ivory wedding dress, simple and unadorned, not a single diamond or crystal. Her belly was already clearly rounded at 4 months. Yet Darius had never seen her look more beautiful. He stood there in the very first suit he had ever worn in his life, a perfectly tailored charcoal gray that made his dark skin glow, watching the woman slowly walk toward him. 3 months ago, he had been a janitor mopping floors at midnight in a skyscraper. Now he was marrying the owner of that building. Life really did know how to tease a man. Zoe was the flower girl. She wore a pale pink dress, holding a basket of petals, her dark curly hair adorned with tiny white flowers, walking ahead of Victoria with the serious expression of someone performing the most important mission of her life. Mrs. Lorraine sat in the front row, tears streaming down her wrinkled brown face. She had never dared to imagine she would one day see her son this happy. Dr. Raymond Brooks was there, too, standing quietly in a corner of the garden, a rare smile on his normally stern face. And Dorothy, the housekeeper, who had been with the Sterling family for 30 years, kept dabbing her eyes with a white lace handkerchief, a gift Mrs. Eleanor, Victoria's mother, had given her long ago. When Victoria stood before Darius, they both fell silent for a moment. No words needed, no vows needed. Just looking into each other's eyes was enough. Then the minister began. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls." When it came time for vows, Darius spoke first. He hadn't prepared a speech. No notes, no carefully crafted lines, only the things rising straight from his heart. "Victoria," he said her name, his voice trembling slightly. 3 months ago, I didn't know who you were. I only knew you were someone I would never dare dream of, someone from another world, another height. He took her hand. But then I realized behind the walls you built was a woman lonely down to her bones, a woman who had forgotten what it felt like to be loved, a woman so strong that no one dared get close. His voice caught. I have nothing to give you, no money, no power, no status, but I have this heart, and from today on it belongs to you completely, without conditions. Victoria stood there, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in her life, someone had said such words to her. Not because of her money, not because of her power, but because of who she was. Then it was Victoria's turn. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. "Darius," she called softly. "I've lived 41 years without knowing what it feels like to truly be loved. I always thought love was a luxury, a privilege that belonged to others, something I didn't deserve." Her hand tightened around his. "Then you appeared, a man who mopped floors at midnight, a single father desperately trying to save his child, a man who didn't know how wealthy I was and didn't care." Her voice began to shake. "You showed me that kindness doesn't require money, that caring doesn't come with conditions, that a plate of scrambled eggs at midnight can be warmer than any lavish banquet." She looked straight into his eyes. "I don't know if I deserve you. I don't know if I can be a good wife or a good mother, but I promise I will try. Every day, one day at a time." She smiled through her tears. "For you, for Zoe, for the child we're about to have, for the family I've waited my whole life for." As they exchanged rings, Zoe stood right beside them, looking up with wide, round eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Miss Victoria is crying. Is she sad?" Darius knelt down beside his daughter. "No, sweetheart. She's not sad. She's happy." "But why do people cry when they're happy?" Darius smiled. Because sometimes when someone is too happy, the heart can't hold it all, so it spills out as tears. Zoe thought for a moment, then nodded, as if she had just learned a great secret of adulthood. Victoria also knelt down beside Darius, looking at Zoe. Zoe, do you give me permission to become part of your family? Zoe tilted her head, her brown eyes studying Victoria intently. You're going to stay with Daddy and me forever? I'll try. You'll read me stories every night? Victoria smiled. If you want. You won't leave like Mommy Keisha, right? The question sliced through the air like a blade. The whole garden fell silent. Victoria squeezed Zoe's hand. I promise you, she said, her voice solemn like a vow. I will never leave. No matter what happens, I will always be here. Zoe stared at her for a long moment. Then she suddenly threw her arms around Victoria. I agree, she said, her voice clear and bright. You can be my mom. In that moment, Darius watched Victoria cry as she had never before. No longer tears of pain, no longer tears of loneliness, but the tears of someone who had finally found where she belonged after so many years lost. She hugged Zoe, then Darius. The three of them stood together, surrounded by roses. Mrs. Lorraine cried. Dorothy cried. Even Dr. Brooks had to turn away to secretly wipe his eyes. And when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the applause rose, not from hundreds of guests like other high society weddings, just a few dozen people, but every clap was sincere, every smile was real. And Darius knew it was worth more than any lavish wedding in the world. That night, once all the guests had left, Darius and Victoria sat together on the balcony, looking out at the garden that had been filled with joy only hours earlier. Zoe was asleep in her room. Mrs. Lorraine was resting in her own guest room. The mansion was still as large as ever, still filled with countless rooms, but it no longer felt empty. Do you regret it? Victoria asked, her voice soft like the night breeze. Darius shook his head. No. Do you? Victoria stayed silent for a moment, then rested her head on his shoulder. I've regretted many things in my life, she said quietly. But this is not one of them. They sat there, saying nothing more, watching the stars shimmer across the Georgia sky. Because sometimes silence, when shared, means more than 1,000 words. But life never lets anyone remain happy for too long without testing them. And the greatest test was already approaching quietly. Not from Richardson, not from Keisha, but from a place neither Darius nor Victoria ever expected. From Victoria's own body. Everything began on a November night. Victoria was in her 6th month of pregnancy. Her belly was round and tight, and the baby inside kicked hard every night, as if eager to greet the outside world. Everything seemed perfect. Zoe had slowly grown accustomed to the new life. She called Victoria Mom Vicky and clung to her every chance she got. Miss Lorraine had moved into a small house near the mansion, close enough to visit her children and grandchildren every day, yet still have her own space. Richardson had gone silent after the wedding. He no longer had any reason to target Victoria. And Darius? For the first time in his life, he felt like he was truly living, not just surviving. But that night, everything changed. Darius was asleep when Victoria's cry of pain jolted him awake. He shot up, turning to the side. Victoria was curled up, both hands clutching her stomach, her face frighteningly pale. Victoria, what's wrong? It hurts, she whimpered, her voice trembling. It hurts so much, Darius. Darius switched on the light, and his heart nearly dropped. On the white sheet was a streak of red blood, spreading rapidly. No, no, Darius stammered, panic numbing his hands. Hold on, I'm calling an ambulance right now. He leapt out of bed, his hand shaking so hard he could barely dial. At the same time, he yelled for Dorothy. 15 minutes later, the ambulance arrived. Darius sat beside Victoria on the stretcher, gripping her hand tightly. Victoria had slipped into semi-consciousness from the pain, her face ashen, her lips pale. "You're going to be okay," Darius whispered, unsure whether he was speaking to her or desperately trying to reassure himself. "You'll be okay. Our baby will too." But when he looked into the eyes of the medical staff, he knew things were far from okay. Emory University Hospital. Darius sat in the surgical waiting room, head down, hands clasped tightly. Dr. Brooks had rushed to the hospital the moment he heard the news. He was in the operating room with the medical team, trying to save both Victoria and the baby. 1 hour passed, then 2, then 3. Darius couldn't remember how many cups of coffee he had drunk, nor how many times he'd paced the hallway. Every second felt like a lifetime. Miss Lorraine arrived near dawn, carrying a sleepy Zoe. "Daddy, why is Mom Vicky at the hospital?" Zoe asked, her voice anxious, even though her eyes were still foggy with sleep. Darius embraced his daughter. "Mom Vicky is sick, sweetheart. The doctors are taking care of her." "Is she going to be okay, Daddy?" Darius couldn't answer. He simply held Zoe tighter, as if clinging to the last bit of peace in the middle of the storm. Nearly 5 hours later, the operating room door finally opened. Dr. Brooks stepped out with a weary face, his eyes sunken with worry. Darius shot to his feet. "Doctor, my wife." Dr. Brooks looked at him, his gaze heavy as stone. "Mr. Thompson, we need to speak in private." Darius's heart clenched. He handed Zoe to Miss Lorraine and followed Dr. Brooks into a small room. As soon as the door closed, Dr. Brooks exhaled. "Mrs. Sterling had placenta previa," he said, his voice dropping low. "The fetus experienced severe oxygen deprivation. We had no choice but to perform an emergency C-section." Darius felt his knees nearly give out. My baby?" "It's a girl," Dr. Brooks said. "Born at 26 weeks. She weighs only 800 grams. 800 grams. Lighter than a bottle of soda. She's being moved to the neonatal intensive care unit," the doctor continued. "Her condition is very serious. Her lungs are not fully developed. We're doing everything we can, but—" He hesitated. "I can't promise anything." Darius felt the entire world collapsing around him. "Victoria, how is my wife?" Dr. Brooks was silent for a few seconds. Then he said, "She lost a great deal of blood. We've transfused and stabilized her for now. But what, doctor?" "To save her life, we had to remove her uterus." Darius stood there, frozen. Remove her uterus. That meant Victoria would never be able to get pregnant again. And the tiny baby lying in that incubator would be her only child, if she survived. Can I see her?" "Yes. But she's very weak. You can only stay a few minutes." Darius stepped into the recovery room. Victoria lay small and fragile among the tubes and machines. Her face was ghostly pale, her lips cracked and dry. But her eyes were open. When she saw Darius, she tried to smile, a faint, fragile smile that made his heart ache. "It's a girl," she whispered. Darius took her hand. "Our daughter is being cared for," he said, forcing his voice to stay steady. "She's tiny but strong, just like her mother." Victoria closed her eyes, tears sliding down her temples. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I couldn't—" "Don't say that." Darius bent down and kissed her forehead. "You did everything. You fought, and you're still fighting. The doctor said I can't have children anymore." Darius tightened his grip on her hand. "That doesn't matter. What matters is that you're alive. You're here, with me, with Zoe, with our daughter." Victoria looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears. You're not disappointed?" Darius's heart twisted. How could she even think that? "Victoria," he said, his voice cracking, "I didn't marry you because you could have children. I married you because you're you, because I love you." It was the first time he said it. "I love you." Victoria's eyes widened as if she couldn't believe the words. You... What did you just say? Darius smiled, even as his own tears began to fall. I love you, Victoria Sterling. Not for your money, not for anything you have. I love you because you're the strongest, loneliest, and most incredible woman I've ever met. Victoria broke down crying as if years of grief were finally spilling out, and Darius simply sat beside her, holding her hand, letting her cry until the last tear fell. Outside in the hallway, Zoe waited with Miss Lorraine. As soon as Darius stepped out, the little girl ran to him. Daddy, is Mom Vicky okay? Darius knelt down, hugging his daughter. Mom Vicky is fine now, sweetheart. She just needs rest. And the baby? I heard the doctor say she had the baby. Darius hesitated. How could he explain to a 6-year-old that the newborn was fighting for her life? The baby is very small, Zoe, he said slowly. So small that she has to stay in a special incubator so the doctors can take care of her. Like the doll in the glass box, Daddy? Darius gave a sad smile. Kind of. But this baby is real. She needs time to grow and get stronger. Zoe was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Seriously, I'll pray for the baby every night, just like Grandma taught me. Darius hugged her tighter. Thank you, Princess. She will feel it for sure. And somewhere inside the neonatal intensive care unit, a tiny little being lay in her incubator, her body no bigger than an adult's hand, fighting for every second of life. Eleanor Rose Thompson, named after the grandmother she would never get to meet. But she would be loved, waited for, hoped for, by all the people standing outside, holding their breath for her. 3 months, 90 days, 2,160 hours. That was how long Eleanor Rose lay in the incubator, fighting for every breath. And it was also how long Darius spent learning the true meaning of the word hope. The first weeks were like hell. Eleanor was so tiny that Darius was afraid to even touch her. Her skin was thin as paper, a beautiful caramel color like her father's, with tiny blue veins visible underneath. Her eyes were still closed. Her fingers were minuscule, fragile like matchsticks. Dr. Brooks made no promises. He only repeated one sentence over and over, We wait and we pray. Victoria was discharged after 2 weeks, but she practically moved into the hospital. Every day she sat beside Eleanor's incubator for hours, placing her hand against the glass as if trying to pass her warmth through it. Mom is here, she whispered, even though she knew Eleanor couldn't hear her. Mom will always be here. Darius sat beside her, holding her hand. They didn't need to say much. Just being there together was enough to hold off the fear. Zoe visited every week. She stood outside the glass, pressing her face close, her round eyes full of wonder. The baby is so small, Daddy, she whispered. Smaller than my doll. But she'll grow, Darius replied. A little more every day. And she did. By week 4, Eleanor gained 50 grams. By week 6, she opened her eyes for the first time. Darius was sitting by the incubator when he saw her tiny eyelids tremble, then slowly lift. Brown eyes, deep and warm, the same shade as Darius's, looked at the world for the very first time. He burst into tears like a child. Victoria! Honey! She opened her eyes! Victoria practically ran over, bending close to the incubator, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled, a real smile, radiant like sunshine after a storm. My daughter, she whispered, tears spilling uncontrollably. You're so beautiful. By week 8, Eleanor could drink breast milk through a tube. By week 10, she was breathing on her own without machines. By week 12, she weighed 2 kilograms. Every gram gained was a victory. Every day that passed was a miracle. And Darius realized that the greatest miracles in life didn't come from money or power. They came from a tiny human in an incubator who simply refused to give up. The day Eleanor was discharged was a late February day. It was still cold outside, but the sunlight was bright, like midsummer. Victoria carried Eleanor in her arms, wrapped in the pink blanket Zoe had chosen. The baby was no longer red and wrinkly. Her skin was a beautiful golden brown, her cheeks round and plump, her brown eyes wide open, taking in everything around her. Zoe skipped beside them, so excited she could barely walk normally. "The baby is coming home! The baby is coming home!" Miss Lorraine stood waiting at the mansion door, tears brimming in her eyes. "Let me hold her for a moment," she said, her voice trembling. Victoria gently placed Eleanor into her arms. Miss Lorraine looked at her tiny granddaughter, this beautiful brown-skinned baby with her son's eyes, then lifted her gaze to the sky. "Dear, do you see our grandchild?" she whispered, as if speaking to her late husband. "She's so beautiful, so beautiful." Darius stood there, watching his mother cradle the baby, watching his wife beside him, watching Zoe laugh in the sunlight. A year ago, he was just a desperate single father mopping floors at midnight, not knowing how to save his child. Now, he had a family he had never dared dream of before. That night, after Eleanor and Zoe had fallen asleep, Darius and Victoria sat together on the balcony. Atlanta's night was quiet. The sky was so clear they could see the stars glittering overhead. "Do you remember the first time we met?" Victoria asked, her voice soft as the breeze. Darius chuckled. "How could I forget? You called me into your office and made the craziest proposal I had ever heard." Victoria laughed too, the pure, light laugh she had slowly relearned over the past year. "That day, I thought I was just signing another business deal," she said. "I didn't realize I was buying a ticket straight to happiness." "Buying?" Darius raised an eyebrow playfully. "So you bought me?" "Oh, stop it!" Victoria punched him lightly on the shoulder. "I paid a very high price for you." They both burst into laughter, their voices echoing into the calm night. Then Victoria suddenly fell quiet. She looked out into the distance, her eyes softening. "You know," she said slowly, "I used to think I didn't deserve to be loved. I thought I was too cold, too harsh, too broken." "You're not broken," Darius said, taking her hand and squeezing gently. I know that now." Victoria smiled. "You and Zoe, and then Eleanor, taught me that." She turned to him, her blue eyes shimmering under the warm yellow light. "Thank you, Darius, for not giving up on me, for seeing who I really am when even I couldn't see it." Darius didn't say anything. He simply leaned in and placed a kiss on her lips. A gentle kiss, a kiss of real love. 1 year later, the mansion was no longer silent. Zoe's laughter echoed down the hallways. Eleanor's baby babbling drifted from the nursery. Miss Lorraine's steady voice recited bedtime stories every night. Dorothy complained nonstop because the kids kept messing up the floor she had just cleaned 10 minutes earlier. Victoria had reduced her workload. She hired more managers so she could spend more time with her family. Richardson had been forced to resign after his illicit transactions came to light. The company still thrived, but for Victoria, it was no longer everything. As for Darius, he was no longer a janitor. But he didn't become some idle husband living off his wife's money either. He founded a charity fund supporting families with children suffering from congenital heart diseases, like Zoe once did. Families with no money, no hope, but with boundless love for their children. The fund focused especially on underserved Black communities in the South, where too many children like Zoe were dying simply because their parents couldn't afford treatment. "Someone helped me when I was at my lowest," Darius said at the launch event. "Now it's my turn to give back." One Sunday afternoon, the whole family gathered in the yard. Eleanor took her first steps on the green grass, her tiny legs wobbling. Zoe stayed close behind, ready to catch her any time she stumbled. "Come on, little Ellie, you can do it." Little Ellie was Zoe's nickname for her sister because Eleanor's initials were also Ellie. 2 sisters, 2 Ellies, one big, one small. Victoria sat beside Darius, her head resting on his shoulder. "Did you ever think life would turn out like this?" she asked softly. Darius shook his head. "No. I used to think life was just surviving day by day, working, paying bills, worrying. I didn't know people could be this happy. And now? Now I know." Darius looked at the 2 children laughing on the grass, his mother sitting under the tree reading, occasionally looking up to smile at the woman beside him, the woman he loved more than anyone in the world. "Now I know," he said, smiling. Life wasn't perfect. There were still tiring days. There were still arguments. There were still sleepless nights because the baby cried. There were pressures from work, from society, from old wounds. Keisha eventually got to see Zoe. They met once a month under Darius's supervision. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect. But Zoe deserved a chance to decide her relationship with her birth mother. Richardson disappeared from their lives, but the business world still had plenty of people eager to go against Victoria. The corporate battlefield had never lacked enemies, and sometimes the ghost of loneliness would return, sitting silently at the edge of Victoria's bed during her restless nights. But unlike before, she no longer faced it alone. She had Darius, Zoe, Eleanor, Miss Lorraine. She had a family, and that, perhaps, was the most precious thing money could never buy. Not skyscrapers, not luxury cars, not expensive dresses, but the laughter of children running through the house, the hand that reaches for yours when night falls, the look that needs no words to be understood. That was love. Real love. A love that sometimes begins in the most unexpected places. The story of Darius Thompson and Victoria Sterling ends here. But their lives continue, with sunny days and rainy days, with smiles and tears, with all the things that make a life worth living. And if this story teaches us anything, perhaps it is this. Sometimes, the strangest beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings, as long as we are brave enough to keep moving forward. If you've stayed with this story until now, thank you for spending your time here. If the journey of Darius, Victoria, and the 2 little Ellies touched you even a little, please give this video a like so YouTube knows you'd love to hear more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next tales of love, loss, forgiveness, and the endings that maybe you're also hoping for somewhere in your own life. And if you're still awake at this hour, tell me one thing. What do you believe truly saved Darius and Victoria? Money, fate, or love?